My name is Rosemary Fennel, and I live in Washington, D.C. I've been married 47 years. I was born in Newport News, Virginia. My father is from that area. My mother was from Northern Virginia in Manassas. My mother had taught me to read, or started teaching me to read when I was about 3 years old. At that time was you obeyed your parents and your grandparents and all adults, frankly. You know, my mother's family was very strict about that, but my father's family was a little bit looser, but I only saw them in the summer. My father passed away from something that probably could have been cured today, high blood pressure, an extreme form of high blood pressure. And my aunts and uncles were so kind to me and to my mother. And to this day, I just love them for it. I'm an only child, and my mother moved back up to Northern Virginia so that she could be closer to her family. She was already, had been in nursing school. She became ill, and she ended up working for the Pentagon. And that's where her career stayed for until she retired as a clerk of the court to the Judge Advocate General for the Air Force. So I talk about the women in my family a lot because they were very influential to my confidence and my upbringing. And my mother and my grandmothers, both of them, were very well known in their communities. My grandmother on my mother's side and my great-grandmothers were both midwives. My father's side, my grandfather became a farmer and eventually a large farmer hulling peanuts and selling like pigs to the Smithfield Bacon Company or something. But they also had a small convenience store and barber shop on their property. And so they were a hub for the community back then. And I say that because during that era and in my early years, we were still operating in America under a Jim Crow system. And so it was, we had a separate but equal society was the paradigm. So blacks and whites did not mix in any public way, in any public areas. And so we built communities and a society within a society. My grandparents had unity with each other, and my mother's siblings had unity with each other. It was impeccable. I don't even think it can be replicated today. But because of that, and they all emphasized religion and education, that was so important for us. And so I grew up with a sense of principle about working hard, about honesty, about unity. And I just automatically knew that as a woman that I was more than just a wife. I was to be who I am. And fortunately, I married someone who understood that. So we would have a vacation every year, and we would travel by train. My mother didn't own a car until I was 16, and we went many places. We also, because of the Jim Crow laws, we couldn't stay at hotels, so our relatives and us, we would stay at each other's homes. My mother was the youngest of her siblings, and I did everything with her. And there was a time when I had to live with her sister during the week because she had to take the bus to the Pentagon by bus and trolley, a combination of them for many years. And so I stayed with her sister, and I come home on the weekends to visit my mother. That was very difficult. I didn't have siblings to help me sort things out. And the world was changing very rapidly. And I didn't understand, because I came from a family where unity was important. For some reason, I found very good friends. In fact, my husband and I knew each other when we were 13 or 14. And my community was very solid. And so I was fortunate in that way. But in other ways, I was confused. Even though we were separated from white people, I never felt hatred towards them. But there was a time in around the civil rights movement when it became apparent all the things that were going on, not just in my community, but with other communities, and how unjust society was. And we kind of just adapted to not being able to go to the same restaurant or drink from the same fountain. But the other kinds of injustices were so egregious. And in some parts of the country, they were, as you know, just beyond belief. It would be hard to believe. So as a teenager, I went to college right away out of high school. And when I came back, I began working for the National Welfare Rights Organization. I started doing volunteer work as a candy striper for Red Cross when I was little. And then when I was able to work, I started working at the Department of Commerce in the summer. And then when I graduated from college, I became more of a civil rights activist. And then I started studying civil rights and some of the issues. And I actually decided that would be integral to my career and my purpose in life. Well, before I graduated, when I graduated from undergraduate school, I went to volunteer at the Embassy of Niger because I was aware of Pan-Africanism and I wanted to help. There was a drought in Niger and people were dying in horrific ways and, just suffering. And I met a Baha'i woman there. I didn't know she was Baha'i, but I started explaining to her that I couldn't be religious just sitting in a church and listening to someone preach about something I didn't understand. And sometimes I felt the minister didn't either. So I said I couldn't go to church, but I felt the need to have a spiritual connection. I had always been raised in that kind of context. And she said she had some similar feelings. She said that one of the things that bothered her was that she had friends from all backgrounds and religious, race, and otherwise, and nobody wanted to connect with each other because they were being taught in their cellular group that they were not to really appreciate other people sometimes. I don't know if she told me that or that's what I interpreted. The bottom line that she told me that I do know is that she had found a religion that embraced all people, all religions, and did not ostracize or in any way minimize people. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that someone could be in the same room with other people who were different and still appreciate those people. She gave me some material to read, and I never talked with her about the faith after that. I just started discovering it on my own, slowly and then more rapidly. I don't know whether I looked it up on the telephone book or Back then we didn't have cell phones, or it was on some of the address to the Baha'i Center was on some of the materials that I received, but I went there. And when I was to the Baha'i Center here in DC, I would hear people praying in different languages. And even though I didn't understand Swahili or any other language, French for that matter, the spirit, the energy, the connection, you just felt you were in a special place. And my investigation of the faith continued through reading the writings of Baha'u'llah and prayer. Prayer was so important to me. They just described the humanity that I wanted to be part of. Before I declared, I had met an auxiliary named of Albert James. And Albert James was almost like, I don't know, he was just very special. He reminded me of my family, but he was different. He was more keen. He was, he was very open. And I asked him, I had told my mother that I was going to change my faith, and she didn't object to it because she saw, I investigated for a couple of years, so and I even went there with her a few times. But because my father wasn't here, I wanted Albert James to explain the faith to my uncle, my mother's oldest brother. And he lived in Oxon Hill, and Mr. James lived someplace like Gaithersburg. He went all the way to Oxon Hill, and he met with my Uncle William. My Uncle William had a little bit of college education. He had always been very self-sufficient, but he was a conservative Baptist, so I didn't know how that was going to go. So I left the room when they talked. And when the conversation ended, my uncle did not object to me changing faiths. That meant everything to me. Not that I wouldn't have done it anyway, but it almost gave me permission to carry our family forward in a way. I can't explain it. I would have become a Baha'i regardless, but somehow, because as I said, we were a family that were always very united. The fact, I didn't know my uncle was open-minded. I just knew that it was important for me to do this, not just for me, but also for my mother, because she really trusted this brother, and he was a very trusted person by all the family. And when he and Mr. James were done with their conversation, I felt permission, and my uncle treated me so well. Ever since then, he treated me, I wasn't just a niece anymore. I was, he gave me land at a really, he was just very kind to me. He wasn't my father, but he tried to assist me in my future, and I will always pray for him and appreciate him. And I declared in '83. From there, I just started applying, instead of my own way of viewing things, I looked at them through a Baha'i lens. I've followed the guidance of the writings in evaluating and acting, and my life just changed. Because I had been involved in civil rights, and it wasn't bringing the solution. And when I read this, I wanted to see how this is possible. And when I read the writings and I read the prayers and I met the people, I understood there was no turning back for me. There has not been a second of turning back for me. My husband was okay. He did not pursue the faith the way I did, but he declared. And the Baha'i faith has guided our home, the culture of our home. He's different than me, but he is a very solid person. and a very genuine person. And that stability has enabled us to progress and overcome tests. I believe around 93, the Baha'i faith encouraged individual action that integrate and incorporate the principles of the faith. And simultaneously, Secretary of Education Richard Riley was saying to us, you have this rich resource of information here at the Department of Education. It is time to go out in ways that are more organic and in real time to share those resources with the community. So it was sort of a perfect storm, and I convened a group of leaders, very respected leaders in the city, to think about how we might put together a nonprofit, privately run organization to work on civic engagement. The reason I chose that was because at the time there were certain tensions. This was a hub for immigrants and newcomers, as well as many Latino immigrants that were already here, and especially in this area. But there was either not a way to include them because of the language, or there was tension between the groups because they didn't have opportunities to communicate and connect with each other.
Multicultural Community Service was founded in 1997 by a series of community members who were looking to get the neighborhood talking again. So MCS was founded to start those discussions and help people work together to achieve that common goal. So we have a mission of civic engagement, and we do that through our language services program, which is interpretation, translation. We have training, which certifies interpreters through our community interpreter training. We have a number of initiatives that we're looking to launch in the coming years to continue to get the community working together. And our goal is for everybody to have an equal piece and an equal voice in our local community. So Rosemary was one of the original founders who said, this is something that we need to do, and pulled together a group of about 5 community organizers and activists. And they founded MCS, and then she was on the board in a number of capacities over the years, from member to chair to vice chair to strategic proposals to grants to launching initiatives. She's been involved with MCS since the get-go. Rosemary is a community connection. She understands DC and the neighborhoods and the people in it. She's worked an entire career, a lifetime in education and helping people achieve potential, and has a deep understanding of what it means to be a part of a local community, as well as what that local community can contribute to the wider circle.